had her. Somebody had her.
Somebody
I'm
got
gonna
it.
put her in my pocket.
Put Michelle away.
I didn't want her being left out.
Oh, shoot.
All right, good evening. Can you guys hear me? No.
Well, I wasn't listening.
Who do you want to see? Oh, you're frozen.
I can hear you.
Poor connection. Pay your bill.
Pay your bill.
Sorry, Vicki, I guess I
All right.
started on that.
Thank you. All right, good evening. So I apologize for the late start for our work session. Tonight, we are going to hear from Mr. Supple. Right? Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Koch. Mrs. Frame is just going to pull up the PowerPoint. I will let you know that I did receive some questions this week about the budget work session, and I've tried to incorporate those answers into the PowerPoint. There's an updated version that is posted to Board Docs, so what's on Board Docs tonight includes all of the information that I intend to go over. So I want to start the conversation about next year's budget by talking about how we anticipate we'll finish this year's budget. So the board may recall that when we had our conversations with employee groups about salaries for next year as we entered into negotiations, I spent some time on April the 3rd going over the district's current financial reality. And at that time, I shared with the board that we know that we don't always end up dollar for dollar on the budget, that usually our revenue's a little bit better, our expenses are a little bit less than what we thought. And because it was April the 3rd, I didn't yet have the data from the full month of March. And those materials had to be prepared something in advance of that. So I did share with the board this slide that showed in the past 2 years how we actually ended relative to the budget. And basically I showed that on average between those 2 years, we had about a 1.2% improvement in our revenue and about a 1.3% better underspending of our expenses. And so I used that. Again, this is a slide that was in that April 3rd presentation, just applying those somewhat gross percentages to the various categories to show you an estimate of where we might end up. And so at that time, I shared with the board that while the revised budget for fiscal year 19, the year that we're currently in, showed that we had a $4.6 million deficit, based on just applying those average percentages and revenue and expense changes, we'd end up with essentially a balanced budget, about $700,000 to the good. Subsequent to that time, I did have the opportunity then to take the March data and the April data, and I have a forecasting tool that I use that I usually deal with in the last quarter of the fiscal year. So I was able to enter that actual data into the forecast tool. And so before I had the numbers from April, I had forecasted that our expense in April was going to be $15,492,939. And our actual April expense was $15,209,734. So I think the forecasting tool is doing a pretty good job of estimating where we are. I give that as an introduction to show you that the average change, that the change in revenue based on, again, the forecasting tool is about where it was when I showed you in April where we thought we would end up. So about a 1.2% improvement in our revenue over the revised budget. What's changed, however, is that our expenses are going to be much closer to what we budgeted. So while we had predicted a 1.3% reduction in expense, now I'm showing that based on actual data through March and actual data through April and projecting May and June using the same tool that was fairly accurate for the month of April, that our expenses are going to come in much closer to budgeted, so 0.3% rather than 1.3%. And so that made a change. Also, there was a slight change in our, as of the end of April, in our budgeted expense. So on April the 3rd, the forecast that used some average changes in revenue and expense based on historic numbers showed that we're going to have about a $700,000 surplus. Using my forecasting tool and applying actual data of March and April, forecasting out May and June, we're now closer to 0.3% reduction in expense, meaning that we now are showing possibly a $2 million deficit in the operating funds. I'd also point out here that, and I'll share information a little bit later in the presentation, that I'm anticipating the need for a larger than normal transfer to the capital fund this year. We are preparing to complete the purchase of a property for the expansion of our Heritage Alternative Program. And we have some funds in our capital fund now that will allow us to do that. But we also have the need to retain a level of fund balance that would allow us to feel secure in the event that we found a number of capital programs come needing to be done, that we would have the funds to be able to address them in an emergency situation. So I made an estimate there. You can see that the previous transfer was estimated to be $500,000. I've put in a plug number of $2.5 million. We will adjust that as necessary as we get into June and determine more exactly where we think that fund balance will be in our capital fund. But the overall good news is that the budget as of April 30th showed that we have about a 20% fund balance, and we're just slightly ahead of that even with all of these changes, because the deficit is a little bit less, is about half of what it was projected to be, and even with the increased transfer, we're still at about 20.5% in our fund balance at the end of the fiscal year 19.
Mr. Supple, should we advance the slide? Thank you.
I did over here, Mrs. Cole. I was looking at the right thing. I apologize.
That's okay, but I think we can help our audience.
And me, I was looking. I'm there.
So we're going to be, in terms of overall fund balance, about the same place where we thought we were going to be, but a little bit different numbers than what was shared with the board in April. And the reasons are kind of an estimate based on past averages, as opposed to a more accurate forecast using the tool that I have, plus more actual data. So this is just some detail of where we are. Again, this is the forecast for fiscal year 19. So you can see that in local revenue, about $2.6 million more than we projected. And I will tell you that $1.6 million of that is the financial institution tax. So in all the other areas, primarily property taxes, probably about $1 million more. We anticipate that there are some areas of the state funding where we're a little bit shy, and probably will anticipate being a little bit shy. And in the federal revenue, really the big change between both state and federal is the placement of funding for our early childhood special education program. So as a district, we budget all of the money for ECSE in our state. And the state and federal government are responsible for assuming the cost of that program, and the split every year is different. So this year we're getting a little bit more federal money. So if you take a look at it's $1.2 million shortfall in the state and $1.3 million to the good in federal, and a lot of that will have to do with the transfer of early childhood special education funding just between state and federal. So the budget all exists in state, and now some of the revenue is coming in as federal revenue. So it's kind of a wash there. So really the biggest difference in the total scheme of things is the financial institutions tax. On the expenditure side, our salaries are, and remember, that's not just the paychecks that everybody gets, but it's sick leave and extra duty and supplemental pay and retiree discount insurance program and all the other things, all that list of things that are included in our salaries. Would be about $1.6 million below budget, anticipating that we might see some, be a little bit above budget in some of the other areas, leading to that, only about $600,000 under budget in total. I would also say at this point that we see some variance year to year, and while April was, I think pretty close in terms of estimating between what I had estimated it would be and what it actually ended up being, may turn out to bring a different result. And I will keep the board updated if I see any substantial shifts in how we think we're going to end this year. I think the overall takeaway is that after years of really tightening our belts, there's less flexibility within the expenditure side, and we're expending more of what we've actually budgeted. All right, so I'm going to move on to a little discussion now about the preliminary budget. This gives you a look at where we are with revenue. The forecast data has been carried over, and then the preliminary budget for next year. So about $2.2 million increase in revenue for next year. So let's talk a little bit about what the changes are. So property taxes are going to be increasing both due to reassessment and new construction. I'll go into a little more detail about that. Our basic formula revenue is declining, and that's because we've seen a decrease in our weighted ADA. So for this year, we're using 16,142 as our weighted ADA, and for next year, we'll be using 15,937. And so that change in weighted ADA is having an impact on the basic formula revenue. Even as the estimated state adequacy target number is increasing, we're getting paid on fewer students. The state does allow us to use the better number of the current year or either of the two preceding years, the first preceding or the second preceding year. And so we have been using the second preceding year because our numbers have been declining somewhat. And so we have kind of staved that off, and now the second preceding year includes a larger drop than what we've seen in the prior. So we phased in that reduction a little bit more slowly, but it showed up a little bit this year. So it's not terrible, but it's having an impact on our overall revenue. Our sales tax, that's one of the other big legs of our three-legged stool. It's basically stable, and expect that to increase slightly. Of course, what happens in the economy will have an impact on that, but we're hoping that it'll stay relatively stable. One thing that I did share with the board as we went through the conversation earlier this year, this fiscal year, about financial institution tax, is that we would make an adjustment in next year's budget. So in this year's budget, we budgeted $170,000 for financial institution tax, and of course we received substantially more than that. But next year we're budgeting $1.7 million, so closer to what we've actually received in the last 2 years. So that is what's included in the fiscal year 20 budget. Our investment earnings have been higher than we've anticipated because the Fed has been raising interest rates and our fund balance has stayed relatively stable. We've taken a look at that and have increased our projected investment earnings for next year. I anticipate that our transportation revenue will be relatively stable. We are paid on the preceding year's expenditures, so next year's revenue will be based on what we spend this fiscal year. And so I expect that the revenue that we receive from the state will be relatively stable. Our Title I funding is based on our actual allocation for fiscal year 20. Fiscal year 19 was a bit of an anomaly because we had a fairly large carryover amount that we were able to incorporate into fiscal year 19. So the additional revenue that we should be receiving in Title I should be based on the allocation. And then finally, our transfer student tuition, our revenue is decreasing. We've seen those numbers really drop off, and you know from the agreement that we have with the Normandy Schools Collaborative that there are some cutoff points when students are no longer able to participate in the program, and we're beginning to see that happen as kids move from level to level and graduate from the system. There's a fewer number of students available, and so we have a significantly reduced number of kids who would be able to participate in that program. So that's also declining. So I wanted to share with you information about what's actually happening with property tax. So we have a form that we need to complete. It's created by the State Auditor's Office. It's a form that we need to submit each year to have our tax rate verified. When I receive the preliminary assessed valuation numbers that we used for our projected tax liability notice, which I shared with the board in April, this is an excerpt from that form. So this shows that based on the state auditor's calculation numbers, our adjusted prior year revenue, that would actually be this current year for property taxes, is $111 million. And the permitted reassessment growth that we get this year, and again, the state auditor sets that percentage, it's 1.9%. So the permitted additional revenue for fiscal year 20 is $2,110,000. And so if you take the 111 and add the 2,110,000, you get 113,163. So $2,110,000 is what we expect to get as a result of new construction and reassessment. And so what is the breakdown between that? This is a formula that is created by the Missouri Association of School Administrators, and it takes the numbers right off the state auditor's form, our current year assessed valuation, what we expect our operating levy will be, what the current year's revenue is, and this is a mathematical calculation, so it's slightly different than what was on the state auditor's form. We don't have an increase in our rate, so that area is blank. The prior year, and for us that would be the year that we're in right now, assessed valuation and our current operating levy, and so what our prior year, or this current year's revenue is. And then what's due to new construction, or what's the value of new construction and improvements? And again, on the state auditor's form, you enter your data, and they have a calculation that happens behind the scenes that takes into account not only the change in real estate, which we get, but also a calculated number for personal property. So you take the real estate and the personal property added together, it's $38.9 million in change. So again, this formula works through, and you can see that the $2,111,000, so essentially the same numbers we saw before, and the split then would be that $1.6 million of that is attributable to new construction and $481,000 as a result of reassessment. On the expenditure side, this is our expenditures for next year. You can see that we have a little over about a $6 million increase in our expenditures. A lot of that has to do with salary increases that were granted to our employee groups, increase in the cost of our benefits, and just some increases. One thing that I would share with the board, and certainly it's a conversation that we'll have as we go through fiscal year 20, and that is that you're going to see some shifts in where we're spending our money. So if you just take a look at purchase services, last year it was $24.4 million, next year it's going to be $14.5 million. We aren't spending $10 million less. That $10 million, a lot of that is up in salaries, because now we're paying, rather than paying first student a contracted price to operate a transportation system, we now have 200 employees that are added to our payroll, and that's been shifted up to salaries. So some of that is offset as you go. Similarly, if you take a look at supplies, it isn't that we've suddenly are splurging and buying a whole bunch of new things. except, and I guess in a way we are, but a lot of those supplies are tires and oil and gasoline for the operation of our transportation services. All of those costs would have been rolled up into the purchase service number that we paid to first student previously. So a shifting of expenditures across categories, but we're going to be relatively stable in what we're doing. So the budget includes negotiated salary increases for fiscal year 20, and we know what they're going to be for 21 as well. The salary budget does include the addition of the transportation personnel. We did make some recommendations for increases in the extra duty budget. The board is going to be voting on that later tonight. That the cost of all of those together is $172,691. There are some increases in addition to salaries for the transportation department. So repairs and maintenance, that line item is going up, as is supplies and gasoline and diesel. So those are some things directly related. You know, we're going to have buy tires and belts and all those things. So those are going up. I will point out that we are still going to have a budget for contracted transportation services, because even though we are operating all of the yellow buses, we still provide some cab service for students, and that is contracted through EMT. So we will still have cab services both for summer school and for the regular school year. And also, I would anticipate that because First Student will be providing services to us through June 30th, that our final invoice payment to First Student won't occur until fiscal year 20. We did make an allocation for strategic planning. The amount included in the budget is $2,250,000. At this point, we put that all in one bucket. But what we're going to do is there's a very specific protocol that's in place. The goal teams are identifying initiatives that they would like to move forward, and then we have a very specific process that we use to vet those ideas. And as we get approval for those ideas, we will reallocate the funds to the area that's appropriate so that those funds can be spent. And so that's what's happening with strategic planning. I did point out earlier to the board that there were a couple of things that would be different in fiscal year 20. One of those was new band uniforms. So for Francis Howell High School, we do have a cycle for replacing sports uniforms that operates on a regular basis. But band uniforms is a pretty expensive item, and we do it only once every 10 years. So it's called out in this report specifically because if you look at Francis Howell High School's activities budget, it would appear that their expenditures have gone up 35%, which is true, but it's because of the addition of a one-time, every 10-year, $100,000 purchase. It's such an anomaly that I felt it needed to be called out, and that's why I did that. We are reinstating the furniture, fixtures, and equipment replacement cycle. That was one thing that had been put on hold as our buildings are aging, so it's the furniture that's contained in them. It's been a while since we've really been able to devote funding to that, so we have allocated money for that. We've also allocated money for a new financial and HR software system. Again, I previously shared with the board that that was going to be a larger expenditure that would show up not only in the fiscal year 20, but also probably in the fiscal year 21 budget as we begin that implementation process, which may take as long as 18 months. So the RFP has been issued. We expect to have some interviews in the latter part of the summer, sometime in the early fall, make a recommendation, and then probably, as I said, about 18 months from that point until we're fully done. So that will probably cross 2 budget cycles.
I know we started a little late. We have about 4 more slides. Do you want to continue, or you want us to come back to workshop?
Let's go ahead and continue. I think it's important. Thank you.
So this is an overview of the preliminary budget. You can see that we're projecting about a $5 million deficit for next year. The transfer to the capital fund is back to a more typical level. And I would, again, share with the board, as I've done previously, we always budget a transfer because you need to, for state purposes, we always need to have that budgeted. If it's not budgeted, we can't do it at the end of the year. So we always budget something there. We actually make a transfer based on our results. So you can see if you look at our actual numbers, there are a number of years when we've done nothing. And there's some years when it's been $1 million and some years $200,000. The amount that's transferred will vary, but we always include something. We project to end this year with about a 20.5% fund balance, and we expect to end next year with a 17.1% fund balance. The other thing that I would stress at this point would be that the forecast is based on hopefully a refined projection of where we're going to end up, so it probably ought to be pretty true to what will happen. The preliminary budget still has the opportunity for there to be swing in it, so there's likelihood that it won't be $5 million when we get to the end of the fiscal year. There are some rather unknown items associated with the operation of our in-house transportation system. We tried to be conservative but also safe in our judgment of what we were going to spend, and there may be an opportunity for some underspending. But that's where we stand, and about a 17% fund balance. So we remain within our fund balance policy, and the likelihood is we'll improve our position a little bit by the time we get to the year. I talked about this a little bit. The building is being purchased for an expansion of the Heritage Alternative Learning Program. That payment will be made in fiscal year 19, and as a result, our fund balance in Capital Projects Fund would be severely diminished, and I will need to make an examination of what we might need to transfer in order to keep an appropriate level in the Capital Projects Fund so that we can deal with emergencies as they might arise. Next, we'll take a look at the 5-year forecast. So what's been done here is to just take fiscal year 19, where we project will end, what the fiscal year 20 budget is, and then using some percentage increases in certain areas and known data where we have it, like on salaries, we have increased the expenditures in years going forward. Again, each of these years has the opportunity to be a little bit better than what we projected. This is a model that shows a course of action that is possible, and so that we can be knowledgeable about what the impact is of decisions that we're making. But the further out that we go, when you're talking about fiscal year 25, I don't have a high degree of confidence in the numbers that you see for fiscal year 25. A lot can happen between now and then, but it is a model that we use, and so the further away you get from actual numbers, the less you should believe that that's going to be the actual results. I want to talk just briefly about the facility utilization program. That program went live in August of 2018. Most of our plans were assuming, kind of a 12-month operation. We haven't been in operation for a full 12 months. I do believe we're on track to break even this year. We had hoped to make a little bit of money. I don't see that that's going to happen. We've collected about $70,000 so far. We have $20,000 that's billed and outstanding. We think that in May and June, we should be able to bill and hopefully collect most of about $12,000. We really have a peak indoor rental season, and I think we'll be able to better leverage that as we go forward. Our summer revenue is a little bit unknown because we didn't really have the program in place last summer. We're making some efforts to take advantage of the fields that we have and hopefully generate some additional revenue. We can see that if we were able to make some upgrades to Barnwell, Bryan, and Cosley, there are a number of outdoor fields at those locations, and it would be attractive for teams and so forth to use those. We're hoping that we'll have a significant increase in our revenue in year 2, just because we've gained a lot of knowledge as we've gone through the process. We'll have a full 12-month cycle. We hope to make some improvements to the facilities to attract more people and groups. And we have been working very hard to improve the relationship with our high schools. Oftentimes there's a lot of demand for facilities at the high school level, and of course our high schools themselves use those facilities quite often. So we have been building those relationships over time in order to insert ourselves appropriately and be able to use those facilities when we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry it took a little bit longer, but
No, excellent. Sorry, we got a late start as well. Or do you have any questions for Mr. Supple? Maybe I'll lead. I have two. One is about, since we're on the facility usage program, I showed, on your slide, you say there's $20,000 outstanding, billed, not collected yet. In general, how is our collections going? Are we having any issues? Are we receiving our revenue appropriately? Any challenges there?
I think we have room for improvement in our collection process. And I've had those conversations with Mr. Thomas Anderson. As an entity that's renting a field or a gymnasium, I would prefer to wait until my season was over and pay you for exactly what I used. I challenged Marvin that as the person who owns a property, I prefer you pay me up front and I'll pay you back for anything that you didn't use. And I think there's a happy medium between the two. So we had been in the business of billing them at the end of a season, and then it was a true bill because it was only what they actually used. And now we're going to require them to pay 50% up front and then 50% at the end, which will give us an opportunity to true anything up at the dates that are not used. We hope to transition fairly quickly to the point where they're paying us 100% up front. I think that's a model that's used in other areas. If the facilities are in demand and they're desirable, if you'd like to reserve them, our rules are that you pay us up front, and if we have to true something up at the end, we'll do that. And so we're moving more quickly towards that.
And I believe that's how, in general, in the community that operates. I know if I go to rent a room, a facility somewhere, I have to pay up front. So, okay. The other question I had was regarding the forecasted budget. So in fiscal year 20, in the preliminary budget, you've added in the salaries based on the negotiations we've just completed.
Yes, ma'am.
And fiscal year 21, since we did primarily 2-year contracts, did you use actual or anticipated salary amounts for 21, or did you just use your general formula?
Kind of a combination.
Okay.
So I think for fiscal year 20, I was better able to calculate, because I was able to advance people on, like for teachers, which is a large thing, I was able to advance them on the scattergram, and so I could make a better estimate. For fiscal year 21, I knew what the gross percentage increase was going to be, and I applied that to the expenditures that we have this year. So it's a little more gross estimation of our cost, because the likelihood is that it will probably come in a little bit less than that. So for example, this
But I
year's
think my real question goes to, in the past, I think you've put in salary
Zero.
increases as 0.
That's correct.
Is that
For fiscal year-
different?
For fiscal year 21, we have built in the salary increases that we anticipate. That's reflected in 21.
Great, thank you.
For 22, 3, 4, 5, those are zeros.
0, thank you. I wanted to make sure I was understanding the numbers appropriately. All right, that's the only questions I had.
I kind of want to follow up. Do you remember what did we collect last year in facilities versus, do you know that off? I mean, you can get back.
I can get back to you. It
Yeah.
was not a lot of money.
Okay,
I'm thinking $20,000-ish.
okay.
We'll find out. We'll find out.
Any other questions? Mr.
Federal
Wright?
funds, you read in the paper and you hear on the news, are federal funds still fairly stable? I know they're going down a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's a great deal.
So, generally speaking, I believe that the conversations taking place in Washington, D.C. at the congressional level are to increase funding levels for K-12 education. So I feel very positive about what's happening. Francis Howell's situation, the change in census poverty and some other factors that are unique to Francis Howell are having an impact on us. the loss of, or not the loss of, but the not having that large carryover amount is having an impact. But generally speaking, the level of support at the federal level for K-12 education is stable to increasing, so I feel very comfortable about that. The impact that we're seeing is more specific to things that are unique to Francis Howell.
Okay.
Mr. Lee?
Going back to the facilities thing, on the slide here, we say that there's $70,000 collected and $20,000 outstanding. But on our financial page, and maybe these are two totally different numbers, it shows year-to-date as of 4/30, $61,000. Why is there such a large discrepancy in those two?
I think it's a timing issue, and these are estimates of what, where we may be. So the financials, when Marvin put these numbers together for me, we may have collected more than where we are on what's been reported to the financials.
Okay. So our financials haven't caught up with Marvin's numbers then, is what you're saying?
Right.
Okay. And then, I guess another kind of related to that, you said we're going to be breaking even. Is that breaking even minus the $20,000 we were previously collecting prior to implementing this program? Because we were collecting $20,000 without doing anything. So are we saying that we're 20,000 plus, or are we saying that we're even for this year?
What I meant is that we should collect enough revenue to cover the direct expenses that we have in fiscal year 19. So if we assume that you have direct expenses of, let's make the math easy, $80,000, and you collect $80,000, you can consider that you're breaking even. You may also consider that if I got $20,000 before, I maybe am not completely breaking even. So depending on your perspective, that's, I think there are two perspectives there. My position was we should be able to cover all of our expenses in fiscal year 19 by revenue that we're collecting.
Okay. And that includes the new individual that we've hired to assist, as well as the software? And is that software a one-year cost, or is that an ongoing yearly cost that we have to factor in?
The big upfront cost was to get the initial license. There's some ongoing license costs with that, so there will be some ongoing costs for the software.
Okay. All right. And then I had another question on your 5-year plan forecast. Your 5-year forecast for fiscal year 20 and future years does not include the 1.2 and 1.3 historic differences that were in there.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, because those have been factored in previous years, and and I think that when I look at this, and I think when the public looks at this and they see a $5 million deficit, they're going to be like, wait a minute, what's going on? But when you look at historically the 1.2 and 1.3, we're very close to a revenue neutral budget.
We haven't included that positive variance, as we've been calling it, in previous budgets. That was something that Kevin used this year when we went into negotiations, just to demonstrate historically how.
But historically, that's something that's shown up. So if you were to factor that into fiscal year 20's budget, it would be much closer to a revenue neutral than a $5 million deficit.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay.
So now I would agree that it has shown up, but it hasn't been shown. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We haven't published documents showing that, other than as we get to this point in the year when we provide forecast information.
Okay. And then one last question on the CPI, which is the 1.9% that you say we're allowed to collect. That's on existing properties.
That's correct.
So if you take 1.9% and you multiply that out by our existing, and then you add our new construction to it, those numbers don't. Is it because the state uses a convoluted formula that doesn't work, or what? How does that work? Because if you take 1.9% times our thing, and you add our new construction, which we can easily get from the assessor, those two numbers, it seems like we're in shortchanged.
Right. What I can tell you is that I use the formula from the state auditor's office that we have to use when we calculate our tax rate that derives a number for permitted new revenue. And I showed you that calculation, it's included in that slide. And then the breakout between new construction and reassessment is also a formulaic calculation. I would agree with you that our actual results tend to be better than that.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Supple, I thought of one more question, and you're likely not prepared to answer it because it's a very new situation. But have you thought about, with our expenses coming up with the new increase in duties from products from China? So I do understand that our highest expenditures are on salary, transportation, now rolling into salary. But have we been contacted by any of our larger vendors with any concerns?
We have not. And again, I would agree with you that I think that people have yet to fully understand what the total impact of tariffs may be, and there is an opportunity that things may be resolved more favorably than we see today, but none of that has been factored into the budget, and that may have an impact on our costs as we go forward, the things that we anticipated. Yeah, I guess the good news is that if you take a look at the total budget, the areas in which we purchase items that would be subject to tariff are pretty small, so even though the impact might be significant on a product line basis, and it may affect an area, it may not have a significant impact on the budget because most of our expenses are not related to things that would be impacted by tariff.
I would tell you I'd be more concerned about the larger items such as HVAC systems and some of the challenges there. So I just really wanted on our radar.
I would agree that the challenge that exists for us would be in the construction side. Building materials, and as you indicated, big equipment like air handling units and so forth. I do think there would be opportunity there to see some increased costs.
We tend to continue to have HVAC system needs, and so it's just something I had thought of and wanted to make sure was on our radar. Okay. Board, any other questions? Okay, thank you,
Next
Mr.
month is a
Supple.
first read, so if there are any additional questions or information that you'd like Mr. Supple to put together, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
Excellent. Board, if we could reconvene at 7 o'clock, or sorry, 7:30. That was 25 minutes ago. 7:30, we'll begin our board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Supple.
You're welcome.
I don't know where I'm gonna put it. Maybe I'll give it to Mary. You're on the microphone.
Is it a Howell? It probably is.
Although I will say, in my defense, which is not what
So we dance our so we're like, I asked my.
I'm sure it's hard reading.
We gave her cards. No. Yeah. I just picked them up the other day.
You know what I mean? I read, it's on my radar. Yeah, like, where you can, you know, I mean, I have requested. No, you have
You gotta. When you went wrong, and there'll be a.
She's helping me out now.
So it was more of a piece of so you know you can't have all your stuff in.
Something to look forward to. I was trying to follow the time. I know. That's why I was wondering. I asked his sister. I see it in church. I asked his sister.
Oh, not true. I'm sorry.
And I posted on my end. Thank you. See, when I looked at it, I just saw that.
Good evening. Again, I want to thank you for your patience this evening. We are running behind schedule due to a heavy time of year where we're working with a lot of our finances and teacher contracts and staffing issues, so thank you for your patience. So with that, I'd like to call to order the Francis Howell School District Board of Education meeting at 7:32. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which is going to be led by Skills USA state champions.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mr. Lane. By roll call.
Mrs. Lang? Aye.
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 Aye. For everyone in attendance, we have Mrs. Walker with us virtually this evening, and she is on cell phone FaceTiming. Motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is recognitions. Mr. Dykeman.
Thank you, Mrs. Coe. The Gifted Support Network provides resources and support to parents and educators of gifted and high-ability children. They help educators understand and work with these children and annually provide educator grants to give teachers the resources they need to help kids thrive in the classroom. Here with us tonight to award 2 of these grants is Krista Brown from the Gifted Support Network.
So tonight, I just wanted to thank you so much for allowing me to be here. It is an honor and a privilege to serve Francis Howell School District and our teachers and students and their parents also. Just to tell you a little bit about our grant process, we had 26 grant applicants this year, so it made the process really difficult to decide who all received a grant because there were so many great applications. And each year we try to award as many grants as possible. This year we did 6 total across the St. Louis area. So we want to really support our teachers and their classrooms with gifted and talented and high-achieving students. So tonight I want to thank Tracy Brandstetter. Can you come up here? Tracy is a 4th and 5th grade educator for the SEGA program for Francis Howell School District. So SEGA stands for Students with Exceptional Gifted Abilities. These are really high-achieving students, and this program is located at Cosley Elementary. Tracy plans to use her grant funds to purchase high-quality literature to meet the needs of her advanced level students. Providing enough challenging and appropriate reading material for these students can be quite a task, as these students are very conscientious readers. Purchasing more material allows her to help them read and discuss advanced level books in her literature circles on a weekly basis. I just wanted to also include, I did not choose the grant recipients, but I know firsthand how much work Tracy and her counterpart, Dina LaChance, put into this program. It is really their heart and their passion, and they change students' lives on a daily basis. And I personally have a son in her program, and it's amazing. It has changed our family. So through this grant, a large variety of books will be available to Tracy's students, and that allows them to continue to read and understand various types of texts. Increasing complexity of these texts also helps build vocabulary. It increases reading comprehension skills and improve reading fluency. And finally, the purchased books will help to foster speaking and listening skills, since the students will use the text to participate in literature discussions Socratic seminars and digital reflections. So she does a lot in her classroom with these students. So I want to thank you for all you do. And I want to present a check for $200 to Tracy.
Oh, yeah.
Always doing a picture.
Come on up here, ladies.
Earrings almost. I know. She has good taste.
Where are they going?
I'm gonna go sit over here.
You have to get the picture.
You gonna hold up your certificate? Yes. Right side up.
Yeah.
Yes. One more. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Skills USA is an applied method for preparing America's high-performance workers in career and technical programs. It provides quality educational experiences for its members in leadership, teamwork, citizenship, and character development. 10 Francis Howell students representing the Lewis and Clark Career Center medaled in their respective competitions at the Skills USA Missouri State Leadership and Skills Conference last month. Earning first place gold medals were Amanda Hassenbeck from Francis Howell North in medical terminology, Jimmy Johnson from Francis Howell High School in power equipment technology. Jimmy could not be with us tonight, though. Mason Aguilar from Central in HVAC sheet metal. This will be Mason's second trip to nationals. He won the state competition last year as a junior. These three will be representing Missouri at nationals. Winning first place in their respective written exams were Dalton Schmidt from Francis Howell High School in HVAC Tech Info. And Logan Bowers from Francis Howell North in Brick Masonry Tech. Unfortunately, the written test is not offered at nationals, at least not yet. The Lewis and Clark Career Center provides career and technical education for St. Charles County juniors and seniors from all 5 school districts in St. Charles County. And a special thanks to Lewis and Clark Director Dr. Andrew Stewart is here with us tonight. Dr. Stewart does remarkable work with our students, so we thank him for that.
Stay there for the parents.
Good luck to our qualifiers each day.
Thanks for all you do.
Thanks for sending us.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Francis Howell Board of Education Director Mary Lang has achieved advanced certification in the Missouri School Boards Association Certified Board Member Program. The program, established by MSBA, recognizes school board members who choose to complete additional professional development beyond what is required by state law. To achieve advanced certification, board members must earn at least 12 additional training credits, read 2 books related to school board service, attend at least 2 MSBA regional or statewide events, and write an essay relating to their study in board service. Board Vice President Chad Lang has achieved master certification in the Missouri School Boards Association Certified Board Member Program. To achieve master certification, board members must earn at least 24 additional training credits, read 2 books related to school board service, attend at least 2 MSBA regional or statewide events, and write a brief essay relating to their study. Both of our board members will be recognized for their ongoing professional development during the MSBA Leadership Summit in June. Congratulations. The next one, the whole board. Yeah.
Yes, no.
Yes.
You have to be in the front this time.
I'll stay in the chat.
And congratulations to all of our board members for achieving the Missouri School Boards Association 2019 Governance Team Award. This recognition is based on the outstanding commitment to ongoing professional development, to regional and statewide leadership, and to active participation in legislative advocacy for public schools by your school board and superintendent. Recipients of this award have met the following criteria. The district is accredited. All 7 school board members have obtained essential CBM certification from MSBA. At least 2 board members have attained the advanced CBM level of certification from MSBA. At least 1 board member has attained the master's level of certification. A quorum of the board and superintendent attended MSBA's 2018 annual conference. At least 3 board members and the superintendent attended the 2019 MSBA Spring Regional Meeting. The district representative attended MSBA's 2019 Legislative Forum, and a board representative participated in MSBA's 2018 Delegate Assembly. Congratulations to all of our board members.
Y'all want a picture?
Y'all want a group shot in front of the guys?
We're good.
We're good? All right. They will be celebrated in June at the MSBA conference as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dykeman. Next on our agenda is patron comments. FHEA, FISPA,
Good evening, Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris, members of the board and executive cabinet. This past weekend, the FISPA negotiating team brought the FISPA 2019-2021 closure agreement to our members for a vote, and we are pleased to tell you that it was unanimously approved. Thanks to everyone for coming to the table with us and working together to negotiate a successful agreement. We look forward tonight to signing off on our FISPA closure document with the Francis Howell School District. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of the travel report as presented for May 16th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Lang. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the travel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mr. Hain. Mr. Hain, I believe you had some questions?
Yeah, I asked that this be pulled so I could get some clarification on a number of issues. It's my understanding, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that this travel report is provided to us before people go on their trips, and then we approve their travel, and that's the approval process. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
That is correct.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, why are 5 of the 10 people that we're approving, their travel has already occurred prior to this meeting?
Sure. First of all, I'll apologize to the board for that. In one instance, it really was a matter of simply got missed. It was discussed and the forms were all filled out and it sat in an inbox and didn't get processed the way it should. And we apologize for that, and I think we've had conversations internally about how we can improve that on a go-forward basis. In the other instance, the 2 of the individuals who were involved in that travel weren't hired until the April board meeting. And so we didn't know how to make plane reservations for people that we didn't know who we were going to hire yet. In retrospect, I think the better course of action would have been to bring blank names for approval. We did share with the board that the TransFinder software did include training and that these individuals would be attending the training. But in both this case and in the World Future Forum, we did not follow our process.
And I guess is this something that we need to have additional meetings? Do we just need, is there different checks and balances? Or what do we need to, you know what I'm saying? I just.
Sure. If it were my answer to you this evening would be, in both of these cases, this is internal process improvement that needs to take place, and that these could have been handled appropriately if we had right checks and balances in place. And we are going to work very hard to make sure that those checks and balances are in place, and we don't have travel occurring, requests for travel approval occurring after the fact.
Okay, and the other thing, I just want to make very clear to everyone here, I'm not saying that any of this travel was not necessary. I believe that all the travel is very warranted, it's all necessary. It's just that if we have a process, we need to make sure that we're following the process. That was my intent of pulling this.
Thank you.
Board, any other questions or concerns? I think Mr. Savoy had one more question. Is this the first time this has happened? Are you aware of any time in the past? Are these one-off instances, or are we looking for a process improvement to an issue that's been systemic? Okay.
I would say no, this is not the first time it's occurred, but I think it is the first time it's occurred for these sets of circumstances. We run an organization with 2,000 employees, and not all of those employees are tuned into our processes. And the instances where this has occurred before is typically a teacher requesting travel who doesn't understand what the cycle is for board meetings. And we find ourselves where they submit the paperwork the day after the board meeting, and it's still before the travel, and they're perplexed as to why that's a problem. And it's easy for me to have a conversation with Dr. Hoven and with Mrs. Simpson so that we can tighten up those processes. It's a little more difficult for me to understand which of our 1,200 certified staff and 70 or 80 administrative staff who don't interact with the board on a regular basis and don't understand our process and procedures, although we publicize what those are. So no, it's not the first time it's occurred, but typically it's because of the situation I've described, that people unfamiliar with board processes submit it in a time framework that they believe is appropriate, but it doesn't meet the board notification deadline.
I'll just say that when we find these errors, we bring them to the board in the travel report. So we're trying to be transparent in that we realize some of the dates have passed and we're bringing it for approval tonight. As Mr. Haynes said, we don't believe there to be any objection to the travel itself, but there is an element of human error when we are talking about a large quantity of travel reports, because the ones under 1,000 just come through us and don't go to the board. Most districts don't have the travel at this level come to the board. So it's not the first time, and there is a human element here, but we can put some structures in place, especially for our folks who are newer. That was one thing that, as I'm listening, I think that we could go back and fix some orientation kinds of things to remind people about our travel processes.
Mr. Haynes?
I just have one more thing, as long as we're making corrections on this. On item number 2, the Pro Start. Unless we have a DeLorean hidden in the garage somewhere, I think they're going to come back before 7/12/2017. So they're leaving on 7/7/2019, and their date of return is 7/12/2017. So I'm sure it's just a typo, but if there's a DeLorean somewhere, give us all a ride, please.
Board, any other questions or comments? All right, by roll call.
Ms. Cope?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. All right, Board, next on our agenda is our best practices. And tonight, I'm going to turn that originally over to Ms. Connie Bachman.
Good evening, Board, Cabinet, guests. I'm excited about our best practice tonight. We're going to talk a little about the STEM TQ program. In 1718, we sent a group of district leaders to a Carnegie Institute that was sponsored by the St. Louis Science Center. And while they were there, they learned about STEM TQ, and in true April fashion, she came back and learned everything there was about it, talked to some folks, and then drummed up some interest. We had 8 teachers participate in the program this year. April will go through what that experience was like for them. I would make a plug that it's a free program for us. The only cost to the district was there were 3 follow-up release days that our teachers participated in to support the ongoing learning throughout the school year. And so we provided release time for them to be able to participate in that. But outside of that, it's a free program for our district. And then I would also plug that, we have professional learning strands that are facilitated by teacher leaders and district leaders on our district PD days. And 2 of our STEM participants facilitated what does STEM look like in the classroom for colleagues this school year. They'll offer it again next school year, and then they'll also offer a level 2 version for those that participated this year and want to continue their learning. So not only are we seeing the benefits in the classrooms of the participants, but we're also seeing them able to share that learning with their colleagues across the districts. We'll let April take it from here.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to share about this program. So STEM TQ, which is the acronym for STEMPAC Teacher Quality Institute. Sorry, I got a little word. So it's actually sponsored by Washington University, and it was really in response to the fact that, as we've all heard, here in Missouri, there are thousands and thousands of STEM-focused careers, jobs that go unfilled each year. And so in recognizing that we have all of those openings in our own state, Washington University developed this program to help prepare students, to help prepare teachers, to inspire students to learn more about STEM and STEM-focused careers. So what STEMPAC includes is over 100 hours of year-long professional development, which actually starts in the summer. So the teachers that participated, they started in July. They spent 10 days of their summer from 8 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon working with regional school districts and cohorts of teachers from our region and business partners to really understand what STEM careers are and to broaden their understanding of cultural awareness in STEM careers, so that when we're representing STEM careers in our classrooms, we're making sure that we are representing all walks of life, and so all of our students can see themselves in these STEM careers. It's also a focus on taking our current curriculum, so what's already being taught in our classroom, and as WashU puts it, STEMatizing it. So adding more of a student-centered element to it, so that the students are engaged in problem solving and inquiry. So as Connie mentioned, we had 8 teachers participate in 1819. The breakdown was we had teachers from Fairmount, Central Elementary, and Daniel Boone. And we had a music teacher, a Spectra teacher, and then 6 classroom teachers. So you can see this isn't just a focus on those teachers who teach just science and math, but really any content area. I would mention also that STEM TQ is open to K through 8 teachers. So as far as the learning goes, as I mentioned, WashU focuses on STEMatizing our already current curriculum so that all students are, as they call it, STEM capable, and that includes field trips for all of their meetings. These were some of the ones when I polled the participants this year. I said, what were your favorite places that you visited? So they did soil erosion and studied soil erosion at Castlewood State Park. They went to and visited with some startups in the Cortex community. They went to the cadaver lab and dissected a human heart. And they went to the pole position raceway and studied physics with go-karts. they went to Express Scripts and learned how they're using, how their company and their business model runs globally. And then also in that program, they're given rubrics to look at their current practices and how they kind of score themselves on if they're emerging on addressing the STEM ideas of inquiry, problem solving, collaboration, as well as cultural relevancy. And then all year long, they participated in cohort meetings. So they would meet up here once a month for 3 hours and look at how they were planning for their curriculum, reflect on how their lessons had gone, and share their success stories with each other. And I kind of quizzed them and got some quotes from them, and here's a couple of things that they had to say. Amy Molitor, third grade teacher at Daniel Boone, said that within this learning, they use collaboration, creativity, communication, and critical thinking in hands-on activities. So as they were spending their over 100 hours learning, they were doing the same sorts of activities that they were turning around and doing with their students. Another teacher, this was from Fairmount, mentioned that taking these field trips and working with these corporate partners was eye-opening because she was really able to bring those takeaways directly to her students. And on the student side, we're in their classrooms, which you could reach out to any of them and they would have an open invitation for you to come and visit. They are engaging their students in the design process where students are making iterations, planning, and changing their plans based on trial and error. Letting their students find success and failure. They're engaging their students in critical thinking activities. Novel engineering is one activity that a lot of our teachers have participated in where they take a story, for example, the 3 javelinas, which is similar to the 3 little pigs, and the students build a structure that could have saved these pigs from the wolf. And so it really gets the students in there and thinking and designing. And then they do a lot of exploring of the diversity that are in STEM careers so that all students can see themselves. So a couple of the quotes that some students shared with them. Loved this one. This is a 3rd grader. I really like STEM things that we get to do because it proves that you don't have to be in Spectra. they see their classmates leave and come back with these cool stories of what they're doing in Spectra, and so many students don't get those opportunities to design and plan and work through those, work through trial and error. And so some of their students were excited that they got to do that designing and building as well. This is precious too. I never thought I was good at the STEM stuff. So many of our students think that's somebody else. They don't see themselves as that engineer. And STEM TQ really helps us to show students that you don't have to be a grown-up to be an engineer. We can all engineer at any age. And as Connie mentioned, a lot of our teachers are coming back and they're so enthused and so excited that they're sharing in so many different ways their learning from the STEM TQ program. So we do have 2 teachers that are leading year-long Strand PD. Many of them are sharing with their grade level PLCs so that they can also, teachers who even didn't participate in the Institute, can also do these same activities, sharing with their PTOs in their building, and collaborating with other teachers in all grade levels of their building, because they're really models. Their colleagues hear about the enthusiasm and excitement in their classrooms, and so then it just boils over and their colleagues are asking, what's going on? And then we also had our music teacher from Fairmount participated. She was asked to participate by STEM TQ in one of their full-day regional workshops to show how STEM applies in a music classroom. And so she was showing how physics and science and math all works together for musical instruments and the production of sound. So a couple of quotes from them. These are some of the participants in the STEM-focused strands. One of the teachers mentioned, I see STEAM as a part of the curriculum, not just science. The collaborative aspect is just as important as the content learned. And as we, in other discussions, talk about soft skills, STEM works right along with that. And then another teacher said that she has gained the ability to look at any subject area to be STEMatized for the students' learning and giving kids the time to wonder about a topic and really build that curiosity and let the students develop and plan or make a model to solve problems. So in 1920, we have 6 teachers that are attending next year. We have 3 teachers from Sager. No, I'm sorry. We have 4 teachers from Sager and 2 teachers from Fairmount. And so they'll be starting this process in July and continue throughout next school year. So, I appreciate you letting me come and talk, but what questions do you have for me?
Or do you have any questions? No, I think it was an excellent presentation on a phenomenal topic. I can tell you that I'm excited to hear that you're excited and that the information is being shared. So if we've sent 8, that information is coming back to our fuller staff, and I appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Our next best practice this evening is Character Strong. Dr. Hogan.
Yes, thank you. We know that at Independence Elementary there are many remarkable things going on all of the time, and so we are excited tonight that Emily Pavia, principal at Independence, has brought a team with her to talk to us about Character Strong.
Good evening, President Cope, members of the board, Dr. Hendricks-Harris, chiefs, and members of the executive cabinet. On behalf of our entire community, thank you so much for allowing us to be here this evening to share a little bit about a resource that we've been able to utilize that has lifted our community to a level that we haven't felt climate-wise in the 13 years that I've been there. And so we've just found real success with it. Brought some of my team members here to kind of talk and share a little bit about our journey. I brought Rachel Wilcox, one of our first grade teachers, Ryan Ball, one of our 4th grade teachers, Shannon Adam, one of our counselors, and Janice Schultz, one of our assistant principals. So thank you so much again for allowing us to be here.
So this journey kind of started when this group of people, when we all went to Washington, D.C. in October, it's been a long time, to accept our National School of Character Award and then to speak at a breakout session. And while we were there, we saw many great speakers, but there was one in particular. He was a keynote one day, and he really, his message just resounded in us, in our hearts. And so we wanted to find out more, and we ended up going to a breakout session that he was leading. And the message was very simple, and it was nothing new, but it was something that really took us back to the whole reason why we got into education, and it was the focus on the whole child. And that message just resonated inside of us all, and it just reignited an old passion for us. And so we came back to Independence to, we couldn't help but, we couldn't contain it inside us. We just had to spread it immediately.
So we came back so deeply aligned to our why. Our why is to educate the whole child. When you find out that 50% of your high school students experience 50% more anxiety than the average psychiatric patient in the 50s, we know we have to go to work. We know that kids are struggling every single day, and we dream of making schools a place that we can come alongside and love kids well. Since October, we got to work. And what's really cool is when you see students saying everything that your heart feels. So I would like to read to you a little bit from a student sample of writing. Here at Independence, the teachers and principals don't have a goal to teach, finish the day, and go home. The teachers have a goal where they want everyone to be loved and cared for. And when the students leave for the day, they make sure they have taught more than just how to read and write. They make sure they have taught how to care for others and become a better person. Independence is what some might call a home. That's what we want every kid to feel.
every single day.
So coming back from our trip in Washington DC, where we were able to pick up some more tools for our toolbox, we've been implementing character education at Independence for quite some time now, well over 10 years. But with these new tools, we were really inspired, and they were really fun, and the staff has been really engaged in them and utilizing them with their students and with themselves. And some of the things that we've been utilizing are some things called compliment creations. Very simple, like, you inspire me to blank. Without you, I would be blank. So it's just something you can easily pull up at the beginning of a class lesson. We've done it in the beginning of a staff meeting. We've done it in the beginning of a leadership meeting with students. Just something really easy to get them engaged and not have the focus be on the you. It's always so much on the you these days, and so if we can focus on others and getting that compliment out. So compliment creations. We've used videos to inspire messages to be able to spark discussions. We've done what we call staff dares, where we send out an email and we say, we dare you to do such and such this week, to be able to inspire that culture and that community that we're striving for. We've created and developed lesson plans to share with our staff, just to be able to have a quick discussion of character in the classroom lesson or through a town hall with the entire grade level to implement. We've printed posters and hung up everywhere, and it's just really, really more than ever. And again, we've been doing this well over 10 years, but it's really more than ever just inspired this level of caring and kindness in our building that is just so important. And the kids are just pouring it out, and the staff is pouring it out, and it's just really been quite a phenomenon.
So I guess one of my roles through all of this is to really help keep track of our data. And so just through monitoring our discipline data for this school year, we started at the beginning of the school year tracking our kindergarten last year cohort group, because those kindergartners had a lot to learn in regards to social emotional. So when they ended the year last year, they had around 80 referrals coming to the office to see us and see the administrators. And so far this year, that kindergarten group that's in first grade now, we've cut their number of referrals in half. And so it's the same kids having half the problems, and we have some other celebrations with that same cohort, just with, of the half referrals, it's only 15 kids that have been referred to the office, and 12 of those 15 kids have already been receiving some great supports, and just their teachers having a better understanding of what they need for that social emotional piece. The other celebration and some data is in our climate survey. One of the things that kept coming up year after year with our staff climate survey is the staff feeling this need to feel more connected to each other. And so we added that question to our staff climate survey last year, and this year we've seen a big improvement in that survey question. So I think it's at 100% the last time I looked at it. So it just closed a few days ago. So big celebration there. So in closing, we would just like to thank you again for allowing us to share. And we know that the strategic plan, the folks on Goal 2 are doing some work in this area, and we're excited to hear more about that work and see it implemented throughout the district. So thank you again.
Thank you. Board, do you have any questions? Mr. Hain?
Yeah, I have a question. I saw part of this program at a PTO meeting. It was much longer, about 20 minutes or a half hour. And I came back and I talked to our superintendent. I said, we got to get these people in here. It's just amazing the things that they're doing. And one of the things I'd like one of you to describe or explain is, I know that we only sent a small group went to Washington for a thing, and you guys saw this, and then you came back. How quickly did it spread throughout your school, or was that something that was quick or slow or whatever? How did that process work?
Yeah, so when we got back, we immediately started talking about this in a staff meeting, and so we got to share that out As always, when you bring up something new, people were skeptical, but I think that the big thing was that we knew that we needed to show by example. And so we started to immediately come up with action steps to implement in our own classes and have conversations with our own teams. And it quickly spread by, I would say, December, or late November, December, we were implementing these unified lessons as a building where we were focusing on the same topics each month, and we've been doing that ever since. And then another celebration is it didn't just stay with our staff. We wanted to share it with everybody. And so at one point, we stayed after school one day and shared this resource and the things that we were doing in the lessons with Fairmount Elementary. They had, how many teachers they had? 10. They had 10 teachers come over on their own time after school, and we were able to speak with them. It was super powerful. And then just recently, we went to Jefferson City to see Character Strong and take part in one of their seminars. And we had 40 staff from Francis Howell was represented there, from Harvest Ridge, and what was it?
I think we had 30 from Henderson, Harvest Ridge, and Independence.
Yeah, so we had a number of buildings, receptive to this and feeling that same kind of reignited passion that we felt. So.
Go ahead,
And I just got one more thing. I'm kind of biased because my grandson goes there. It is amazing, the transformation in him, and to see him grow and to see his compassion and kindness and awareness of other kids. It's just amazing. It's awesome to see that. And he had a little saying, I know there's all these different sayings out there, and I texted my daughter to make sure I had it right, but his saying that he got from school was, a slice of nice can make a mile of smiles. So I always forget that, but he never forgets it.
I'll remind you of that.
All right, board, any other questions or comments? Okay, so I appreciate the presentation as well, and I just want to share with you that the energy that you brought this evening, I can only imagine how that's spread throughout your school. So thank you for being so passionate and transferring that to your culture and to your kids. So thank you.
Thank you. Is it okay to share something? Because they're the stars. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. I might have cried.
So at my place of employment, I keep a little packet of quotes that you need when you need them. And so I'll add this to that packet.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is our curriculum review, first reading. So we had several curriculums brought forward. Board, please make sure you take a look. If you have any comments or concerns, please address them to the cabinet. MSBA board report.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of May. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the growing trend in Missouri school districts to provide school-based health centers. These health centers are often established in partnership with local healthcare providers to meet the needs of students at school and keep them in class. One such school district is Riverview Gardens in the St. Louis area. Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Chiquita Riddle, tells us she believes the new clinic will have a positive impact on student achievement.
we're able to provide our scholars in our district with healthcare services, both preventive health, acute, as well as the mental health component that they've talked about. Our high school is home to about 1,500 scholars, and those scholars are able to have consents completed by their parents, and once they are turned in, they have immediate access to the healthcare center. They can make their own appointments, and they can go. Our goal is not to interrupt those core instructional time, and to ensure that they are focused in class, but they're also receiving those healthcare services that are needed.
Riddle made her comments during the recent MSBA Student Showcase held at the Capitol in Jefferson City during the 2019 Legislative Forum. In 2016, MSBA convened a school-based health center task force to bring together school districts throughout the state and healthcare agencies to explore a statewide model that could be adapted to meet the healthcare and mental health needs of children in local schools and communities. Resources on the implementation of school-based health centers are available through the MSBA website. Building bridges to a safer community was the theme of the recent 2019 Partners in Governance Conference, sponsored by MSBA, the Missouri Municipal League, the Missouri Association of Counties, and other groups. Panelists and speakers at the event stressed the importance of collaboration among law enforcement, school districts, and other entities to keep our schools and communities as safe as possible. The director of the Missouri Department of Public Safety, Sandy Karsten, told those attending the event it's critical local and state law enforcement work closely with school districts.
The Highway Patrol in 2018 conducted over 3,000 school walkthroughs. And you might ask, what's a school walkthrough? That involves a trooper, local officer, a school resource officer, walking through a school, making connections and building on the relationships that they have with teachers, with students, with some of the healthcare people in schools, so that in the time of need, that relationship is not something that needs to be built, but it is taken care of ahead of time.
Education Safety Coordinator with MSBA Center for Education Safety, Amy Kiso, was among the panelists discussing the importance of mental health services for students and community members. CES offers behavioral risk assessment training for school district staff designed to identify and help troubled students before an incident occurs. The MSBA Board of Directors at its April meeting and retreat approved some changes to the Regional Executive Committee structure, including the elimination of the Member Resources Committee and the Member Resources Representative position on the REC. A new position of Delegate Coordinator will be established for each of MSBA's 17 regions. That person will be responsible for communicating with and mobilizing MSBA delegates on issues that could have an impact on our public schools. Some of the changes approved by the Board of Directors will require changes to the MSBA bylaws. Those bylaws changes will be considered by the Delegate Assembly that meets on June 8th in conjunction with the 2019 Leadership Summit to be held June 7th through 9th in St. Charles. The Delegate Assembly also will be electing new state officers for the coming year. You can watch video interviews with the candidates for state office posted on the MSBA website. Registration for the Leadership Summit also is available on the MSBA website. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Tell you, we are so excited that it's coming to St. Charles, and it's not graduation weekend, so two bonuses there. For next on our agenda, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2019-2021 FISPA closure document as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Stickledge, seconded by Mr. Hain. Mrs. Simpkins, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I just want to thank all of the teams that participated in the negotiation process. We had a lot of great conversation. Just appreciate the board's time and all of the FISPA members coming together to talk with us and problem solve. We have a good agreement to work with for the next couple of years, and we're excited to present it to you today.
Great, thank you. Board, any questions, comments? All right, by roll call. Mr. Lang?
Aye.
Aye.
Lang, Stigledge,
Aye.
Aye.
Walker?
She said it.
Okay.
She cut it out.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Would you please join me in signing the document?
Thank you, sir.
You got the most job, having Carl here at the bottom also.
Oh, you've got more than one? It's great working with you both on this. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work. Thank you, Ms. Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, board, next on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to approve the additional hall monitor positions for Francis Howell High, Francis Howell Central, and Francis Howell North as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Lane. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you. As we talk to our high school leaders, we know that this is a resource that they are greatly advocating for. Our hall monitor, the hall monitor positions that we're asking for today will provide some safety and security for our students, allow for some additional supervision in some of those common areas like our hallways and our stairwells, and will allow those hall monitors will build some relationships with students as they're moving around the building. The additional adults will provide some supervision, even on those early release days when our students are hanging out after dismissal but before athletic events. So we are recommending 3 hall monitors at Francis Howell North due to the layout of the building, and then 2 hall monitors at the other buildings. I will note that we did update the memo today just to over-clarify the total cost of the hall monitors. These will become regular positions that will have benefits as well. And so we wanted to be sure that you understood that these would be permanent positions with salary and benefits attached.
Thank you, Ms. Simpkins. Board, any questions? Okay, by roll call.
Ms. Stigledge? Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the extra duty recommendations as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Stigledge, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Ms. Simpkins?
Thank you. First, I just want to thank the Extra Duty Committee. We have a group that is represented with representation from FHEA, administrators, teachers, and coaches. They spend several hours for several days in a room together to talk about the program that we offer for our students when it comes to extra duty. We did talk a little bit about our salary structure. You'll remember last year we moved away from a STEP program, trying to move to one stipend that we can provide to our coaches and our sponsors to be a little more competitive with our benchmark districts. So our recommendations today include to move forward with that plan.
We did look at the St. Charles County averages for extra duty positions, and we are recommending a 5% increase for those people that are within the range, and we'll bring that minimum salary stipend up 5% to stay within the area of our benchmark districts. We're not quite there yet when we look at some of our other benchmark districts outside of St. Charles County, but we are making small steps to get there. The other recommendations that we wanted to focus on this year, we're bringing back some of our student interest groups at the elementary and middle school level. Those were reductions that were made in the past, and we are looking for ways to better connect our students with our schools and provide them some opportunities to stay connected in their communities. So you'll see in the memo that we are recommending that those student interest groups come back at the elementary and middle school level. If you have any questions about some of the other recommendations that are there in the memo, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. The biggest change at high school was adding girls wrestling, as that's been a MSBA sponsored event that's come forward, as well as the Max Scholars program that will become part of our extra duty salary schedule. So in total, with the new positions that we are requesting, as well as the salary increase, it's a total of $172,691. We shared this amount with the board during our negotiations process. So it shouldn't come as a surprise, but some of the detail may be new to you tonight. Thank you. Board, any questions?
I think we had some great conversation as the committee started, so I think we're all in an understanding. Okay, by roll call.
Mr. Hain?
Abstain.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 601. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2019-2020 and the 2020-2021 pay increases and salary schedules as presented.
So
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Stiglich. Mrs. Simpkins?
Thank you. So these are the employee groups that are not represented by FISPA or FHEA, and we're bringing forward the salary schedules for those groups to you tonight. We have followed the same salary percentage increases that the board has previously approved for those other employee groups to these. One thing that I will note that's a little different is our occupational therapist and physical therapist salary schedule. So our physical therapists and occupational therapists are now coming out of school required to have a doctorate, and their previous salary schedule did not have a doctorate channel. So we met with that group and had some conversation about how we might be able to move forward with that. Within our research, we found that our benchmark districts pay their occupational therapists and physical therapists based on the teacher salary schedule, which would have a doctorate lane. So we've worked together with that group. We will, when one of our OTs or PTs does obtain their doctorate, we'll move them to the teacher salary schedule. Any new OTs or PTs that will be hired by the district will be, their salaries will be based off of our teacher salary schedule. But we will continue with our current OT-PT schedule for those that are currently on it, and until we're able to move everyone over to a different process.
Board, any questions? Okay, by roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve a reduction in force for sign language interpreters as presented.
So. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mr. Hain. Mrs. Simpkins?
Our staffing plan for the 1920 school year included 9 interpreter positions to meet our student needs. We have 2 students that will be no longer in need of those services, and so we are recommending to reduce the staffing plan from 9 interpreters to 7. We'll be working very closely with those interpreters that are affected by this plan, talking through some of the benefits that we can provide or other employment opportunities that we can provide, and helping them to move forward as they may seek other employment outside of the district.
Thank you. Board, any questions? By roll call?
Ms. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the substitute teacher pay as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Stiglitz. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you. So our recommendation for substitute teacher pay is a little unique this year. Instead of just looking at increasing the pay for our substitute teachers, we really wanted a way that we could focus on incentivizing our substitute teachers to work in Francis Howell. Many of our substitute teachers will be employed for several different districts, kind of spreading out their time, and can pick and choose the hours in which they work, the number of days in which they work. We know that when we have positions that go unfilled, it is very stressful for our buildings. Many of you have heard us talk about the no-fills and all of the strategies that we've put in place to be sure that we have a strong substitute teacher force available to prevent that from happening. A celebration is that we're doing much better this year than last year, but we are still not at that baseline year where we had an average of about 1.7 no-fills a day. That's what we hope to get back to. So our recommendation today is to have a tiered system for our substitute teachers. So when our substitute teachers start the 1920 school year, they'll all be paid at that regular rate that they're paid now of $95 per day. But any substitute that would work 30 or more days in first quarter would be eligible for an increase in their daily rate of pay for second quarter, and then it would go to $105 per day. We'll watch the number of days that they work, and any substitute teacher throughout the course of second quarter that would work 60 days or more would then be eligible for the increase for third quarter, which would then pay them at $110 per day. And then for the end of third quarter, we'll watch to see how many days they worked. Anyone that works at least 90 days would be eligible for the increase in fourth quarter, which would be $125. So it's a larger increase in fourth quarter for a few reasons. By then, most of our retired teachers have reached their capacity of 550 hours through the retirement system. We know there's some burnout that happens when it's spring and there's beautiful weather outside and they've worked a lot. So incentivizing them to get to that higher rate of pay and maybe do some work when we see some no-fills in the springtime. We looked at the number of substitutes that were close. So if we had used this system this year, we would have had about 20 to 29 folks that maybe would have been close to working that next level, hitting that next level. So we're hoping that we've hit the right number of days each quarter that will incentivize them just to pick up a few extra days to get to that higher dollar amount within that next semester. If we had had this system in place in 18-19, it would have cost us about $33,000 more in salary. That's just an estimate based on what they worked this year, so hope it may increase larger the more that they work and build up to those next levels of salary. But if that means that our no-fill number goes down and our stress levels in our buildings go down, I think it's a good thing.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Simpkins. Any questions, board? Mr. Hain?
I know that to help eliminate some of this, we hired a number of full-time substitutes. How does their rate of pay relate to these rates of pay?
The permanent substitutes are at $110 a day. And we'll move them along the tier.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Simpkins, I had one. Your example starts at first quarter and moves its way up, etc. If we have someone join the substitute team in second quarter, does that count as their first quarter, or do they miss the entire program for the year?
We would not want them to miss the entire program for the year. I think we'll look at the number of days that they're working in that quarter And we can move them up if they've done the 30, then we'll move them up to that second tier.
Okay, I just think it's good to add to the program some structure on that, because I think we have people
Yes.
join that team throughout the year.
Absolutely.
And just don't want them to miss the opportunity completely just because they didn't start on day one.
Yes. And Mr. Hain, I think I misspoke. Our permanent substitute teachers are paid at minimum teacher salary. I'm sorry, it's $25,000 is what they started at when they employed.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Wasn't thinking clearly.
Board, any other questions? All right. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. I think, I hope that brings us some success. I think it's an innovative concept.
We'll try it out, see how it goes.
Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the additional certified positions as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Haynes, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Mrs. Simpkins, again.
Yes, we are recommending the addition of a half-time literacy coach at Fairmont Elementary School. The position will be fully funded by Title II funds. We have a large number of teachers at Fairmont, about 53 on staff, and one literacy coach struggles to see each and every one of them and provide the support that they need. So this will put Fairmont in line with other buildings throughout the district and provide that support for our teachers and their Tier 1 instruction as we focus on reading success at Fairmont.
Thank you. Board, any questions? By roll call.
Ms. Coe?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. The Mrs. Simpkins show's over for this evening. You need some water. Board, next on our agenda is our fiscal responsibility. I would entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Stiglich. By roll call?
Is there discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. Mr. Supple, did you have anything to elaborate on? We'll go with that. No? Board, any questions? Mr. Hain.
Question. First on the list, on last meeting, you had, Mr. Supple, you had said something about a tanker truck for servicing our buses and different things like that. Is that the truck under item 30? I'm assuming that's not the truck under item 36. Did that fall through? I don't see that on here.
You're correct that the item that's on this agenda is not the fueling truck. We were able to place a deposit and we are going to complete that purchase, but the purchase will come at a later date because right now it's just being built. So we will bring that to the board. But yes, we were able to secure the fuel truck, and they're in the process of building it right now.
Okay. And then on item 37, which is the construction of the two different transportation facilities. Is this another one of those items that I believe that this work is already in process and now we're approving it after the fact? Again, is this the same process or procedure, or I just wanted to clarify why we're approving this after the fact again?
This is a little bit different. I'll try to explain the process here. So we began with some conceptual drawings for what was going to take place at the various facilities. We asked for quotes from some of our preferred vendors. We knew that we were intending to operate summer school from the annex location. In order to do that successfully, we were going to have to get our staff located, so we had to move pretty quickly. But sometimes the wheels of government outside of this organization grind slowly, and so we were waiting for permits. Our permits came on April the 23rd. And so, yes, we have begun work at that site. because it would be impossible for us to get the work done and get our staff located there. And even with beginning the work early, we're still running a little bit behind of where we would like to be. In a perfect world, we would have had estimates of everything that was going to be done, and we would have brought that to you sooner. The actuality here is that the various quotes trickled in over a period of time, and the permitting process took a little longer than we thought. And so yes, the work is underway. Not all of it is completed, but the work is underway. But it was critical for us to get that done so that we could reasonably operate summer school from the annex location.
And I want to make it very clear once again, this is work that is necessary and needed for our district to function and go forward. It's just more or less the process, and us approving something after it's been completed is what I'm bringing forward. Thank you.
Mrs. Lang?
I have a quick question on that. At the Transportation Task Force meeting last night, there was mentioning of delays in certain projects. So it just made me wonder, do we have anything in our bid process and our contracts if there are delays? Are there penalties? Are there?
I am not a fan of liquidated damages, which is typically the vehicle that you would use. You spend a lot of time arguing about that. I learned from a very wise lawyer that it's sometimes difficult to prove what your damages are. So it gives people some comfort to have a liquidated damages clause, but once you try to enforce it, you have to prove that you've actually suffered some loss as a result of the delay. That gets to be very difficult. You end up spending more in lawyers' fees than you ever collect in damages. So we have been exerting our influence as possible to speed the process along. The issue is that there was a change in project managers, and I think that the immediacy of the project was lost on the person who replaced the first project manager, and we suffered as a result.
And then I have one more question of Mike. Are you done, Mike? Were you done?
Go ahead.
Number 46, it mentions, I had it pulled up here, cafeteria tables.
Yes, ma'am.
Last month we had talked about Sodexo funds. Is that part of that, or would this be coming from a different fund?
I apologize. This wasn't as spelled out as clearly as it might have been. It makes total sense to me when I look at it, but the account code that's being used begins with Fund 5, which is our food service fund. So our food service fund is paying for that equipment.
Okay, so it will say Fund 5.
Yes.
Mr. Hain, did you have another question?
No, it was along those lines.
Okay. Mrs. Lang, do you have another question?
No.
Michelle? Okay. All right. By roll call.
Mr. Lang.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the monthly financial report for April 2019 as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Mr. Supple, anything to add?
Just a couple things. I would just point out, because we had this conversation earlier in the fiscal year, you'll notice that the property tax collections in the month of April 2019 were $191,000. Last year they were $737,000. I only mention that because earlier we had an earlier payment, and there was some speculation that we were going to get this huge windfall in property taxes, and it really is a matter of timing. So I just bring it up that you can see now this year is trailing a little bit because we got that early payment. So there is some fluctuation that occurs year to year in terms of the timing of the payments. So just wanted to share that. Also, I would point out that you can see that in the federal revenue, we received $714,000 of early childhood special ed revenue. Again, following up on the budget workshop presentation, that accounts for some of that increase in federal revenue and the offset in state. So we're not getting any more ECSE revenue than what we budgeted. It's just a split between state and federal that's a little bit different. And I have been sharing with the board in the memo that our salaries in total have been tracking a little bit lower as a percentage of budget. Again, that would be reflective of what was presented in the forecast document that I shared earlier with the board. So we budgeted $121.2 million, and we're about 1.3% below where we were last year as a percent of budget. And I think that that tracks well with what was presented in the forecast.
Board, any additional questions or comments? Okay. By roll call. Ms. Stiglich?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meal and a la carte prices for the 2019-2020 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Stiglich, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. We're just continuing the process of trying to achieve lunch parity, and that means that the amount of support provided by students who pay full price for a meal should be equal to the amount of support that we receive for free and reduced price lunches. And so there's a whole calculation that's detailed in the memo that was presented, and we could actually increase our prices more than what's being recommended in order to reach that lunch parity level. But we're continuing our process of not doing more than we're mandated to do, which is 10 cents a year. Our calculation this year is a minimum of 12 cents, and we could go as high as 35 in order to reach parity. So we have some work to do. We've substantially closed the gap over the years, and I would just imagine that we'll continue to see increases of this nature as we move forward, and hopefully we will soon reach parity. But it's just a standard recommendation. The final chart on the briefing paper shows that over the last 5 or 6 years, this has been our process of increasing lunch prices.
Mr. Supple, help me recall who mandates that.
That's the federal government, so participating in the lunch program, that's one of the requirements of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, which is the authorization of funds.
Great, thank you. Board, any other questions? Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, on the analysis where you talked about the differences and how we only have to go up 10 cents and all that, the one comment on there, it says if the average price paid is less than a difference, SFA, which is us, I guess, must either gradually adjust the price or provide non-federal funding to cover the difference. What exactly does that mean, and what would that amount be what is that amount that would be the difference? Do we even have an idea on that?
I couldn't answer that question. I wasn't prepared to answer that question.
Okay.
Board, any other questions at this time? Right, by roll call.
Mr. Haynes?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. All right, board, next on our agenda is policy review. There's a number of policies that are available for first reading. Please make sure you take a look. On the second section of the policy review, we have our second readings. So board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the policy review second reading as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Stiglich, seconded by Mrs. Lang.
I just want to bring to the board's attention that this is a first and second read, which is not something that we typically do, but in order to prepare for next school year, I think we need to begin to communicate out the change in policy as soon as possible. So that is why we're bringing it for a first and second read in the same night.
Board, any questions or comments? Mrs. Stigledge.
From a nurse, former nurse for the district, this policy has been way overdue. So I think I really commend your nurse coordinator, Dr. Vanderpool, and everybody for pulling this together. This is really what we need to do. Thank you.
Board, any other questions or comments?
I do have a question.
Mrs. Walker has a question.
I'm curious, what do the surrounding districts do?
Her question is, what does the surrounding districts do?
So everybody's is a little different. I don't know that when we were working on this policy that we found any consistency. It could be anywhere from we don't allow any food in the classrooms at all, so we found a few policies that were like that, to we don't allow home baked goods and anything else is fair game. The one that we probably looked most recently at was parkways, and this is similar to that.
I think Rockwood's is that way too. I'm almost sure.
We need to take some additional steps beyond just this one, but one thing at a time. So I anticipate we'll be bringing additions and changes to this policy forward in the coming months.
Board, any other questions? Mr. Hain.
I guess the question that I have is what and why are we doing this? Is this for allergens only if we're providing packaged goods that have the ingredients on them?
Sure.
And we're not providing home things. The ingredient list is on there. Is this for the purpose of allergens, or is this for the purpose of obesity, or what is the purpose of this document?
Yeah, it has more to do with the life-threatening allergies that we continue to see in our schools. And while we could tell people that you need to have a package, putting it upon our nurses and our teachers to read every ingredient, because even if it's on a pre-approved package list, it needs to be reviewed because of change of ingredients every single time, has not been something that we've been very successful at. So again, when you are at a very busy school with a lot of things going on, first thing in the morning, for example, that element of human error is not something that we want to continue to work with, especially when those allergies are life-threatening for some of our students.
So I'll just comment, anyone that has a family member that has a life-threatening allergy, this is a big concern, and I know it affects the entire community, and I know we all want to participate with our children in our classrooms, but it's a high risk for the students, it's a high risk for the district, and I appreciate that we're headed in this direction.
Janet currently still has some war wounds for the first time we tried to bring this through. She's cleaning off her scars.
I'm still licking my wounds, but that's okay.
Okay, board, any other questions, comments? Okay, by roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Nay.
Aye.
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 Motion carries 6-1. Board, next on our agenda is our Strategic Planning Committee updates. We have this evening Goal 3, 4, and 5. So for Goal 3, turning over to Ms.
Ms. Coe, given the hour, if you would like for us just to present those reports in writing on board docs, we'd be happy to do that. If there are some highlights that we have to hit, we can hit them next month because we have a little more leeway in our schedule for the evening.
Excellent. One moment, please. Board, would you like that in writing?
It's in writing.
Oh, I mean, the in writing, yes, but the in writing update, is that good for this evening?
Yeah.
Were there any questions or anything you want to address specifically? I would just let you know that I'm excited that we continue to make progress. I know it's a long process, so thank you for continuing to move that forward. All right, superintendent comments.
Just a few things. 5 high school students. 5 high school seniors from France Howell have been selected for recognition as part of the 2019 Missouri Scholars 100, a program that honors 100 of Missouri's highest achieving students. You're going to recognize some of these names. David Yang and Sarah Ryder from France Howell High School, Stephanie Monsoon and Michael Yu from France Howell Central, and Ariana Chavez from Francis Howell North were all recognized. Cosley kindergarten teacher Caitlin Howard was able to think quickly on her feet and perform the Heimlich maneuver on one of her students who was choking. She was able to dislodge the blockage and get him to the school nurse. The student and his family were appreciative, and they were surprised her with flowers and a note. The student even drew a picture writing, "Thank you, Miss Howard, for saving my life." The main entrance to France Howell Central is boarded up with plywood until the facilities department is able to repair the structure over the summer. As you likely have seen by now, students have collaborated on a beautiful mural with designs that celebrate Francis Howell Central, including a likeness of Principal Dr. Sunny Arnell that says it's always sunny at Francis Howell Central. In a recent ceremony of more than 70 Francis Howell High School students, there was a presentation with the Missouri Seal of Biliteracy that recognizes proficiency in 2 languages. Mastery of 2 or more languages makes important contributions to a student's cognitive development, understanding of diverse cultures, and economic opportunities. These skills include the ability to communicate with clients, colleagues, and associates who speak a language other than English. Francis Howell North student-run website Francis Howell North Today was recognized as one of the top high school websites in the country with the National Scholastic Press Association's Online Pacemaker Award. Only 22 schools' websites received this award. Francis Howell North journalism advisor Aaron Manfield has compared the award to the Pulitzer Prize for high school journalism. During the inaugural Missouri STEM signing day in Jefferson City, Francis Howell North senior Corey Valeroy was recognized for his passion and STEM accomplishments. Valeroy was one of 10 students from around the state who was honored for his academic achievement and presented with a $1,000 scholarship. And finally, a reminder for everyone that our next board meeting will be Thursday, June 6th, next door at the Hollenbeck Gym. The work session will start at 6:30 and the regular meeting at 7. How many of you will accidentally come here that night?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hendricks-Harris. All right, any Board of Education requests at this time? Nope, no additional requests. One moment. Yeah, okay, let's do board comments. Ms. Stiglitz.
I just have a couple. First of all, I want to thank the district for inviting the board and all the members of the cabinet to go over to the Project Lead the Way Summit. Mr. Lane and I had a chance to go over there and was so impressed with what those kids were doing. I just could not. It was amazing. Of course, I really liked the one with the blood pressure, but that was a whole nother story. So it was really good. I'm dying to know which one won. Did you get? Do we have that information?
We'll find out.
Would you? Because I know the guy with the ski, with the breakaway ski, I thought was how you can do that just blew my mind away. And the other thing I would like to say is we had the opportunity last week to go to the Lewis and Clark recognition. It was again truly inspiring. I don't know if you guys were, but one of the student remarks was made by a Francis Howell North student, and she nailed it. And we saw her today at the project house, and we told her what an awesome job she did. So she's already looking forward to seeing us at graduation. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that.
Board, any other comments? Mr. Lane.
We all did a lot of the same things. I'll piggyback on Janet. Once we went to the recognition at Lewis and Clark, we both made an appointment today, and we visited with Dr. Andrew Stewart, and we got to tour the school. It was well worth your time if you've not been there. And then we got to tour the home that they built. These students built an actual home right next to Target up here at Cave Springs. It's pretty cool what these kids are involved with. It was very nice to see. All of us here enjoyed a night at the MSBA Spring Regional Meeting in University City, so we were able to network with our counterparts, and that was a good evening for us to get out there and see other colleagues and see what they do and what they're working with in their districts at that time. And I'd also like to celebrate this month we have our teachers, nurses, secretaries, and principals and their days. And thanks to everything that they do for our children in the district.
Thank Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, next on our agenda, if we can take a look at our June 6th meeting, our next meeting. As Dr. Hendricks Harris mentioned, that meeting will be held at Hollenbeck Middle School. Is there anything we need to add or adjust on this agenda? Okay. Please take a look at our June 18th meeting. That is our board retreat. I know that sounds exciting to a lot of people in the audience, the board retreat. It's at Spencer Library in one of the meeting rooms.
Last year was Independence.
Yeah, so.
I thought we were going to Hawaii.
Yeah, no spa treatment for you, Patrick. Please take a look. Dr. Hendricks Harris and Mr. Lang and I met to talk about the agenda, and Dr. Hendricks Harris is putting together all of the comments that have come in from the board for agenda items, trying to group those together in some systematic thinking ways in the agenda. And so she's working on that and have that out to us shortly. A lot of good topics there. If you have additional retreat items, please let us know. We're trying to finalize that agenda. Spencer Road Library, yes. Do not go to Massage Lux or, we're at the library. All right, June 20th meeting. Please take a look. Any adjustments that we're aware of at this time? Silence is golden. All right, board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Walker. By roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.